And hello everyone, and welcome in to Matt Sports Talk. And in this video, we are going to talk about the men's standings and where all 8 teams that made the Crossroads League tournament this year, where they finished in league play this year, and where they were projected to be. And of course, I just did that on the women's side in my last video, so I'll be doing that on the men's side this year. And starting first on the men's side will be number 1 seeded Grace. They are 23-5 overall, 15-3 in conference play. And you look at where they were projected to be. They were projected to finish 3rd, and they finished 1st. So pretty much exactly where they're projected to be. I mean, obviously, you know, if you're 1 or 2 spots ahead or behind where your projection is, I still say that you pretty much finished exactly where you should have finished. So obviously for Grace, pretty much right where they were projected to be. So big congratulations to head coach Scott Moore and his team for what they've done this year. And they finished 1st again, 23-5 overall, 15-3 in conference play, and they secured the number 1 seed, home court advantage throughout the Crossroads League tournament, and also the first automatic bid into the NAIA National Tournament coming up in mid-March. And then you have the Bethel Pilots that finished 4th, 2nd, excuse me. The Bethel Pilots finished 2nd, projected finished 21-7 overall, or not finished, but currently sitting at currently sitting 21-7 overall, and I apologize for that. 21-7 currently overall for the Pilots of Bethel. They finished 14-4 in conference play, and you look at where they were projected to finish. This was a Bethel team that last year, and you look at where they finished last year. Last year they finished 5th. This year they finished 2nd. They were projected to finish 7th this year, and they finished 2nd. So obviously they beyond exceeded expectations under head coach Steve Draben, and they just had some amazing games this year and had some great offensive scoring, not just by Luke McBride, but Preston Phillips, James Anderson, as well as Trent Edwards, and all of those guys just made a huge impact for the Pilots team this year, getting them up to that number 2 seed and well exceeding the expectations of where they were projected to be, which was 7th this year, and they ended up 2nd. And then in 3rd, and of course, all these teams that I'm talking about that finished 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, respectively in league play. Those are the teams, the 8 teams that made the Crossroads League tournament. Also, in terms of being seeded in that order, so Grace the 1 seed, Bethel the 2 seed, and then Huntington finished 3rd. They are the 3 seed in the Crossroads League tournament. They finished 3rd, 22-6. They currently are overall. They finished 12-6 in the Crossroads League. This was a really good year for head coach Corey Alford and company, especially with a lot of his team being seniors and key seniors as far as that goes, with Jackson Paul, Lane Sparks, and then 5th-year grad transfer from Marian University, Max Gizzi. So obviously for Corey and his team, they definitely had a really good year, and they were projected to finish 2nd in the conference. They finished 3rd, so pretty much spot on to where they were projected to finish. So very well deserved for them. And then again, they are that number 3 seed in the Crossroads League tournament, and they will be hosting 6th-seeded St. Francis tomorrow night. And of course, once again, I'll be talking about those matchups toward the end of this video, so make sure that you stay tuned for that. Then if I did not mention in my women's video all the matchups, you will have number 1 seeded Indiana Wesleyan hosting 8 seed Goshen, 2 seed St. Francis hosting 7 seed Bethel, 3 seed, and this is on the women's side, 3 seed Marian hosting 6 seed Mount Vernon Nazarene, and then 4 seed Spring Arbor hosting 5 seed Huntington. And those will be your women's playoff matchups, if I did not clarify that in my women's video that I recorded just a few minutes ago. So now that we're all caught up and we're all on the same page, so this, again, on the men's side, Grace the 1, Bethel the 2, Huntington the 3, and then you get down to Spring Arbor men, who were projected to finish 4th. Now, at one point, they were down to 6th, and then 2 out of their last 3 wins, as I mentioned yesterday, They upset number 14 Huntington, upset number 10 Bethel. They finished 11-7 in conference. They are currently 19-9 overall. And so obviously for Spring Arbor, they finished exactly where they were supposed to finish, in that number 4 spot. And they will be hosting 5th-seeded Indiana Wesleyan coming up tomorrow night at 7 p.m. And then you get down to 5th-seeded Indiana Wesleyan. This is a team that was projected to finish first. You know, they made the Elite Eight last year and then lost to Langston out of Oklahoma. And for the Wildcats of Indiana Wesleyan, there were just so many high expectations this year. And then, of course, the start of the year, they went a perfect, I believe it was 10-0 or 11-0 in non-conference play. And then they lost the first 3 games of conference to Huntington, the Huntington, Grace, and Bethel. And that got them to 0-3 to start off conference play. And that was something that has never been done in the Greg Tonigal era, starting off 0-3, and then they were able to beat Spring Arbor at home December 7th in a come-from-behind win to get their first conference win. And then starting off January, you know, Iowa was ranked as high as 3rd in preseason, and by early January they were down to number 22, and then they had the first 2 games of January on the road at St. Francis and then at Taylor. The Wildcats dropped both of those games to fall out of the top 25 for the first time in over 110 active polls. And then, of course, you know, Iowa also had some bad losses in January at Marion back on January 18th that officially got them out of being ranked, including receiving votes for the first time, probably more than likely for the first time in a very long time. And then of course they had, like I said, they had a lot of injuries, especially from redshirt junior Luke Brown, who came back healthy, thankfully, for the end of January. And for the Wildcats, despite all those injuries, they go into the league tournament 20-8, 10-8 in conference, so all of their losses were in conference play. One thing of note for the Wildcats is, at least a really positive thing, is that after the 0-3 start, they finished 7-5 after that. And in that 7-5 stretch, they got 3 big wins and 3 very key wins as far as that goes, beating then number 18 Huntington, then beating then number 7 Bethel, and then beating then receiving votes University of St. Francis. All 3 of those games, Indiana Wesleyan won at home in the second meeting of the season between those 3 teams. And those 3 wins were so huge for the Wildcats, and they were able to but they were able to win, to be undefeated at home all but 1 game for the 2nd straight season in a row, and the only home loss this year and last year was to Grace. So the Wildcats able to keep that streak going in the next season with being undefeated at home, at least right now, the only home loss being to Grace for the 2nd straight season. So the Wildcats will look to hopefully build on that next year and maybe go undefeated at home for the whole entire season. We'll have to see how that goes. But for the Wildcats, they have a great recruiting class coming in next year. They're going to get a young man that should be playing next year that is a Division I transfer, 7'3". So I'm excited to see him play. I think the Wildcats should easily be projected in the top 3 next year, especially with getting this young man playing that is over 7 foot tall. I think that is going to make a big difference for that. And of course, for the Wildcats, the last time they had a player that was on their roster that was 7 foot or taller, in those years, the Wildcats finished no worse than 3rd in league play all of those years. So if that's any indication for next season, I'm definitely excited for that. And that's a little bit more in depth about Iowa, that they were projected 1st. They ended up finishing 5th. But again, some of that's a little bit skewed because of all their injuries this year. And then you get down to St. Francis, finished tied for 5th, but actually finished 6th because of the common opponent tiebreaker that the Wildcats hold over the Cougars, because of the Wildcats beating Bethel the 2nd time, and the Cougars got swept by Bethel. So that's why the Wildcats are ahead of St. Francis. So for St. Francis, they finished officially in 6th place. They were projected 5th, so literally exactly right where they were projected to be. But one thing for St. Francis under head coach Chad Lacrosse, the Cougars it started out this season in 2nd place, I believe 3-0 at one point, and then they went 7-8 after that. And obviously they had an extremely tough schedule in the months of January and February, so that's more than likely the reason why they fell down a lot in the standings, is just because the rough schedule. And sometimes that happens for any team in the league, no matter what league or division it is. You just sometimes have an extremely tough schedule toward the end of the regular season, where you have some extremely big games, and you really don't win any of that, and then of course obviously you fall down in the standings. So, but for St. Francis, despite that, I mean, they're in the national tournament, 17-11 overall going into the league tournament. They finished 10-8 in the conference. Now, one thing is for sure about the men's side is you're definitely going to have 6 out of the 8 teams make the national tournament. So, and that's something that is extremely rare, and just goes to show you how competitive the Crossroads League is this year, especially on the men's side. And I've alluded to this in my recap videos over the last month or so that I've been doing these. Is, I've talked about that, to where the league is the most competitive that I've ever seen, and you could easily have 5 or 6 of the 8 league playoff teams make the national tournament. And that's exactly what's going to happen, as the top 6 seeds are all locked into the national tournament. So obviously for this league tournament coming up, obviously, none of these games are really that important in terms of trying to get into nationals. But if you're any of the 6 teams that are for sure going to be in the national tournament, you would want to build momentum in this league tournament, try to get some wins, or at least play really close and hard. Obviously is going to be a big goal. And that's a little bit more about St. Francis. Now, getting down to Taylor, they finished 7th, 7-11 in the conference, 14-14 overall. Obviously, they're not going to make the national tournament. But for Taylor, they were projected 9th this year. Remember, I've talked about that they have a brand new first-year head coach, Austin Peters, came to Taylor from Arizona Christian, which Arizona Christian is a big program, and that team is also in the national tournament this year. So obviously for Austin Peters, and what a job he's done in his first season. I know they're not going to make the national tournament, but obviously for them, well, I shouldn't say they're not going to make the national tournament, but they still have a chance to do that. But the only way they're going to do that is if they run the league tournament and get to the championship game. Then they would get the second automatic bid into the national tournament, and that's the only way that they can make it. So, obviously for Taylor, that's going to be a big goal they have under Austin Peters in this league tournament. Try to beat Bethel in Mishawaka tomorrow night. Then if you win that game, then you would either go to St. Francis, or you would go to Huntington in the second round. So, and obviously both of those places are extremely tough to play in. And then if you won that game, then you would probably go to Grace for the championship. And Taylor is a team that nearly upset Grace the second time in the regular season at Grace, I should add. And the championship game, if Grace runs the first 2 rounds, that championship game would be at Grace. So obviously for the Trojans, anything can happen. They still have a chance of getting into the national tournament, and that's the most important thing for them. And then you look at Mount Vernon Nazarene, that made the Crossroads League tournament only because of sweeping Marion. That win at Marion last Wednesday punched Mount Vernon's ticket into the league tournament, withholding the head-to-head tiebreaker over the Knights. And for Mount Vernon, they were projected to finish 8th, and that is exactly where they finished, spot on. So obviously for Mount Vernon, they were projected to finish 8th, and then I talked about Taylor projected 9th. They finished 7th. So really Taylor and Mount Vernon, finished exactly where they were projected to be, around that 7th to 8th spot. For Mount Vernon, 14-14 overall. They finished 6-12 in the conference. Now for Mount Vernon as well as Taylor, the only way they're going to make it to national tournament is if one of those 2 teams, or maybe them both, run the conference tournament and get to the title game. Then that would be the only way those 2 teams would get in the national tournament. They're not going to get in any other way. And for Mount Vernon, being the 8th seed, they have to go to Grace tomorrow night. Then if they won that game, then they would either more than likely go to Spring Arbor or Iwu on Friday night. And then if they won that game, then they probably more than likely would either go to Huntington or to Bethel for the league championship game next Monday night. So obviously, and there's still a chance Mount Vernon could get there. So that is a more specific, in-depth look at them. And then, of course, you have, I alluded to Taylor. Now for Marion men, they finished 9th this year, did not make the league tournament. They finished 11-17 overall, 5-13 in the conference. They were projected to finish 6th, and they finished 9th. So obviously, they did not exceed the expectation and did not finish where they were projected to be. So obviously, for them, that's really tough. You're projected in the middle of the pack, and then you end up not making the league tournament. And of course, one thing for Marion is their result also is a little bit skewed because they did not have everybody on their roster healthy the whole year. So that obviously, I'm sure, played a big factor into that. But maybe also because of a first-year head coach, Pat Knight, who is the son of the legendary Hall of Fame coach, Bob Knight. So obviously, maybe those two reasons are why Marion struggled a little bit. So that is a little bit more in-depth look at them. And then for Goshen, the Maple Leafs, they were projected to finish last, and that's exactly where they finished. And I mentioned in my video yesterday, or I think it was yesterday, maybe it was Thursday, where I talked about the Maple Leafs, and I said, this is a team that, I think it was yesterday when I recapped all the men's games from Saturday, and I mentioned that for the Maple Leafs, they won 5 games this year in the regular season, which was their most wins out of the last 2 seasons combined, but they finished 0-18 in the conference, so they're still looking to get a conference win. But they have to be proud of what they did under head coach Kyle Capps this year. They played really, really hard with some teams, just came out on the wrong side of a scoreboard. But for them, that's how you build momentum into next season. And then, of course, hopefully for them, they'll be able to get that first conference win or get multiple conference wins next year. So that's something that they can look forward to. And then finally looking at previewing the men's games for tomorrow night. 7-seed Taylor will be at 2-seed Bethel, 6-seed St. Francis at 3-seed Huntington, 5-seed Iwu at 4-seed Spring Arbor, and 8-seed Mount Vernon Nazarene at 1-seed Grace. And that will be all of your matchups in the Crossroads League quarterfinals coming up tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Then the semifinal round will be Friday night at 7 p.m. and then the championship game next Monday night, and that will be also at 7 p.m. So that is a more specific look at not just previewing the playoff matches or the playoff matchups for tomorrow night, but talking more specifically about where everybody finished in league play and where they were projected to be. And then, of course, as I mentioned too, I'll be recording a video Wednesday recapping all of the quarterfinal women's games recording a video Wednesday afternoon recapping all of the men's quarterfinal games from tomorrow night, and then Thursday recording a women's recap video of all the quarterfinal games from Wednesday night. And then, of course, in the semifinal round, I'll be recording a video probably Monday recapping the men's and the women's semifinal rounds. And then, of course, I'll recap the championship games on Tuesday and Wednesday, next Tuesday and Wednesday, respectively. And then, of course, once we get to the selection show next Thursday, March 6th, I'll be doing a recap video the next day, that Friday, previewing all of the Crossroads League National Tournament matchups, where everybody's going to be going, what seed they're going to be, and I'll definitely do that. And then, of course, whenever all the Crossroads League schools lose in the national tournament, whenever that might be throughout that tournament, I'll do a full recap video recapping those games. And then when what I'll do is whoever loses, or whenever the Crossroads League schools lose in the national tournament, then I'll go back to my Spotify podcast form, recap those games, and as well as give you a season recap of where everybody finished, obviously where everybody finished overall on the men's and the women's side, and then also talk about just who all the leaders were on every team in terms of points scored per game. So obviously those things are going to be way too much to talk about in one YouTube video. So that's why I'll utilize my Spotify podcast website for that once we get toward the very end of March. And of course, you can find me on that Spotify podcast website. I believe it's called Spotify for Creators, if that helps you out a little bit more. And if you go there and then you search Matt Sports Talk in the search bar, and you'll find my account name. There's a picture with a basketball next to it, and then you'll be able to find me that way and listen to a couple of the episodes that I have on there. But I'll be posting, of course, more on that forum once we get toward the end of March. Again, doing a full season recap of all the offensive leaders from all 10 teams in terms of points per game, talking about that. And then, of course, recapping all of the national tournament games for the men and the women. And I'll be doing all that at that time. So again, thanks so much for watching these videos. And if this video was helpful to you, please either like, comment, or subscribe. Any one of those options helps me out greatly, and it is very much appreciated. And I hope you have a blessed rest of your day and week ahead. And thanks again for watching this video. God bless.